Betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. That's the part that stings the most. It always comes from the ones who say, "I love you," then turn around and twist the knife. My father died on Tuesday. My husband announced his mistress on Wednesday at the funeral in front of 200 mourners while I was giving the eulogy. The woman he chose was my own stepsister, the same one who'd been comforting me through my grief, the same one who whispered, "I'm sorry for your loss," the same one who'd been living in my guest room for 3 months. But what they didn't know was, I'd been planning something too. And unlike his pathetic confession, mine would destroy everything he'd ever worked for. The quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, when I still believed in things like loyalty and family bonds. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I know because I was staring at the clock when my phone buzzed, unable to sleep after another argument with Andrew about his work trips that seemed to multiply lately. The voice from the hospital was clinical, apologetic. Massive heart attack, despite all our money, all our connections, all the private doctors on speed dial. My father, tech mogul Daniel Vanderbilt, was gone before the ambulance arrived. "I'm so sorry, baby," Andrew whispered, pulling me close as I sat there stunned, still holding the phone. His embrace felt different somehow, distracted. Even in my grief, I noticed how quickly he reached for his own phone, typing something urgent. "I'll handle everything. Don't worry about anything," he eagerly stated. That was my first warning. By sunrise, our penthouse was swarming with people. Andrew had called everyone, the funeral home, the caterers, the florists, even the media relations team. He moved through our living room like a man possessed, orchestrating my father's send-off with the efficiency of a hostile takeover, which I would later realize it essentially was. "You need to rest," he kept saying, guiding me toward the bedroom whenever I tried to engage with the planning. "Let me handle the funeral details. Your father would want you to grieve properly." Grieve properly. As if there was a correct way to mourn the only person who'd ever truly understood me. That's when Aaliyah arrived. My stepsister swept in like a grief counselor, flowing black fabric and perfectly timed tears. "Oh, Morgan," she breathed, wrapping me in her signature, warm vanilla perfume. "I came as soon as I heard. You shouldn't be alone right now." The irony was suffocating. Aaliyah, who'd barely spoken to our father in 5 years, suddenly positioning herself as the devoted daughter. Aaliyah, who'd been between apartments for months and had been camping in our guest suite, eating our food and using our Netflix password. Aaliyah, who always managed to insert herself into my life's most vulnerable moments. "I'll stay as long as you need," she promised, squeezing my hands with theatrical concern. Family is everything. I watched her move through my home with the familiarity of someone who belonged there, directing caterers, answering my phone, playing the perfect supporting stepsister. Her and Andrew worked together seamlessly, like they'd done this before, like they'd practiced. The strangest part was how Andrew seemed to come alive when she was around. The distracted husband, who'd been emotionally absent for months, suddenly had energy, opinions, and leadership qualities I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. He laughed at Aaliyah's jokes, sought her advice on flower arrangements, touched her shoulder when making points about the service. I made a mental note of everything, ensuring grief wasn't making me paranoid. I know people handle death differently. Some withdrew. Others threw themselves into action. Andrew was clearly the latter, and Aaliyah was simply being helpful. After all, she'd lost a father too, even if their relationship had been complicated. But then I noticed my grandmother's pearl necklace around Aaliyah's throat, during the florist consultation. "Oh, this?" she said when I stared at her neck, her fingers moving to the pearls with practiced innocence. "I found it in the guest bathroom. I was going to return it, but with everything happening," she trailed off with a helpless shrug. "I thought you might want something of your grandmother's close by during this difficult time." The guest bathroom? I'd been searching for that necklace for weeks, turning the master suite upside down. My smile felt like ice forming over deep water. "Of course, how thoughtful." I held my palm out. She hesitantly unlatched the necklace and placed it in my hand. That night, I lay awake listening to Andrew and Aaliyah in his study. His voice carried through our supposedly soundproof walls. Low, intimate, unapologetic. I know. After everything settles down, I promise. Soon." Soon what? I slipped out of bed and quietly walked down the hallway to the study. I saw them. Through the crack in his study door, he held her in an embrace. "She doesn't suspect anything," he was saying. "The timing is perfect, actually. She's too grief-stricken to pay attention." "I kind of feel bad, Andrew." But we both knew this day would come. Daniel's death just moved up our timeline. Timeline for what? My bare feet were silent on the marble tiles as I moved closer, heart hammering against my ribs. The city lights were shining into the dark room. 3 days? He continued. "We wait 3 days. Let her bury her father, then we make the announcement. Clean break, minimal drama, the lawyers have everything ready." Announcement? Lawyers? Clean break? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Andrew wasn't grieving or even stressed about funeral planning. He was orchestrating the end of our marriage, using my father's death as cover for his grand exit. Alia was helping him plan it. I backed away from the door on trembling legs, my mind reeling. 5 years of marriage, 2 years of trying for children, countless nights of me confiding my dreams and fears. All of it had been leading to this moment. Andrew waited for my father to die so he could leave me without consequences. But he'd made one crucial miscalculation. He thought grief would make me weak, pliable, easy to discard. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I slipped back into our bed. 20 minutes later, he returned to our room like nothing had happened. I began planning too, because if Andrew wanted to use my father's funeral as the stage for his betrayal, then I'd make sure it was a performance none of us would ever forget. After all, I was Daniel Vanderbilt's daughter, and we didn't just play to win, we played to destroy. The morning of the funeral arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the weather was mocking the solemnity of the occasion. I stood before my full-length mirror, adjusting the simple black Chanel dress, watching Andrew in the reflection as he straightened his tie with the precision of a man preparing for battle. "You look beautiful," he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. The compliment felt like a blade wrapped in silk. "Your father would be proud." Would he? I wondered. Or would he be horrified to know his funeral was about to become the stage for his son-in-law's grand betrayal? "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing in my chest, "for everything you've done these past few days. I couldn't have managed without you." Andrew's reflection smiled. "Of course, we're family." Family, that word again, wielded like a weapon by people who understood nothing about its true meaning. Aaliyah appeared in the doorway, resplendent in designer black that clung to her curves. "The cars are here," she announced, her voice pitched perfectly between reverence and efficiency. "Morgan, are you ready?" Ready? Such a loaded question. Was I ready to bury my father? Was I ready to discover the full scope of my husband's betrayal? Was I ready to become the woman this moment required me to be? "Yes," I said simply. "I'm ready." The funeral home had outdone itself. St. Catherine's Cathedral looked like something from a fairy tale, if fairy tales included tech moguls and corporate dynasties. White lilies cascaded from every surface, their perfume heavy and cloying in the morning air. The guest list read like a Fortune 500 directory. Politicians, celebrities, and all the beautiful people who'd wanted a piece of my father's empire. I moved through the receiving line like a ghost, accepting condolences with gracious nods and appropriate responses. "Thank you for coming." He would have appreciated your words. Yes, it was very sudden. Each interaction felt scripted, rehearsed, performed for an audience that was already pulling out their phones to document their presence at the event of the season. Andrew stayed close, his hand possessive on my lower back, playing the devoted husband with Academy Award precision. But I noticed how his eyes scanned the crowd, searching for something or someone. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, each vibration making him tense with barely contained energy. "Nervous?" I asked, as we took our seats in the front pew. "Just want everything to go perfectly," he murmured, checking his watch. "Your father deserves that." The service began with all the pomp and circumstance money could buy. The choir's voices soared toward the vaulted ceiling. The priest's words painted my father as a titan of a tech industry and a devoted family man. All true, of course, but sanitized for public consumption. They didn't mention his ruthless business tactics or his ability to see through people's facades. They didn't talk about how he'd built his empire by understanding that information was power and power was everything. I paid attention to those lessons. When they called me to the podium for the eulogy, the cathedral fell silent. 200 faces turned toward me, some genuine in their grief, others merely curious spectators at the Grief Olympics. I opened my tablet to begin reading my prepared remarks, my hands steady, despite the weight of every eye in the building. My father used to say that true strength isn't measured by what you build, but by what survives after you're gone, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. He believed that legacy isn't just about money or achievements. It's about the people you trust to carry your values forward. I let those words hang in the air, watching Andrew shift uncomfortably in his seat. Aaliyah had gone pale beside him. My dad, Daniel Vanderbilt, was many things. A visionary, a leader, a force of nature in the business world. But to me, he was simply Dad. The man who taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty, about showing up when it matters, about protecting the people you love, even when they can't protect themselves. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the congregation. In the third row, I spotted several of Andrew's business partners, men who'd been notably absent from his recent meetings. In the fifth row, his biggest client, the one whose contract had been mysteriously postponed. All watching, all listening, all witnesses to what was about to unfold. He also taught me to pay attention, I continued. My voice grew stronger. To watch, to listen, to understand that people's actions always tell you more than their words. That's when Andrew stood up. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that it sent a ripple of confusion through the cathedral. He looked desperate, like a man who just realized he was standing on quicksand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking through the silence. I can't do this anymore." The microphone picked up every word, amplifying his confession to every corner of the building. Phones appeared like magic. Cameras swiveled to capture the moment when my husband decided my father's funeral was the perfect venue for his confession. "Morgan," he continued, his voice gaining strength as if he'd found his rhythm. "I need to tell you something. Tell everyone something. This marriage, it's been a lie. I'm in love with someone else. I've been in love with someone else for months." The cathedral erupted in whispers and gasps. The rustle of designer fabric as 200 guests leaned forward in their seats. This was better than any reality show, any gossip column scandal. This was real-time devastation, served with a side of high society drama. "Her name is Aaliyah," Andrew announced, turning toward my stepsister with the theatrical flourish of a man who'd been rehearsing this moment. "We didn't plan this, but we can't fight what we feel." Aaliyah rose on Kay, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar nomination. "I'm so sorry, Morgan," she sobbed, her voice carried across the silent cathedral. "We never meant for it to happen this way." 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for the breakdown. The tears. The dramatic collapse that would complete their morning entertainment. They wanted to see the grieving daughter and betrayed wife crumble under the weight of this public humiliation. I smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile or a broken one. It was the smile I'd inherited from my father. Calm, calculating, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who knew what it meant. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steady, "for showing everyone exactly who you are." Then I leaned closer to the microphone and turned toward Andrew. "Did you really think I didn't know?" His face drained of all color and his hands began to shake. The silence that followed my words stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Andrew stood frozen in the aisle, his face cycling through expressions of confusion, fear, and dawning realization. Aaliyah had stopped her theatrical sobbing, her mascara-streaked face now wearing the look of someone who just realized they'd walked into a trap. But I wasn't done with my eulogy. "As I was saying," I continued, my voice carried through the microphone. "My father taught me many valuable lessons. Perhaps the most important one was this: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." I turned off my tablet and set it aside, speaking now from the heart, or what was left of it. He also taught me that timing is everything in business and life. "So I think this is the perfect moment to share some news of my own." I paused, letting the anticipation build as cameras continued rolling and phones captured every moment. "You see, 3 days ago, while I was grieving the loss of my father, I received a very interesting phone call from his lawyer." Andrew's eyes widened. Aaliyah had gone completely still, like a deer sensing the hunter's approach. "It seems my father had been doing some investigating of his own these past few months. Fascinating read. Corporate surveillance reports, financial audits, even some rather intimate photographs." I smiled at the crowd, enjoying the ripple of shock that ran through the pews. Turns out my father didn't just build a tech empire. He was quite the detective, and when he needed to be, a lawyer. Harry Davidson rose from his seat in the third row with impeccable timing. At 75, he moved with the measured precision of a man who'd orchestrated more corporate takedowns than hostile generals. He carried a leather briefcase that seemed to pulse with dangerous information. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I'd like you to meet my father's executor, who has some documents he'd very much like to share with my soon-to-be ex-husband." Andrew stumbled backward as Harry approached, but there was nowhere to run in a cathedral filled with witnesses. "Morgan, what is this? What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" I laughed, and the sound echoed off the stone walls. "I'm finishing my father's last project. You see, Andrew, he figured out your little scheme months ago. The shell companies with transferred assets, the secret offshore accounts. He knew you were planning to divorce me, thinking you could walk away with half of everything." Harry opened his briefcase with theatrical precision, withdrawing a thick folder marked confidential in red letters. "Mr. Fletcher," he said in his growly courtroom voice, "I believe you're familiar with Pinnacle Holdings, Eastview Investments, and Magenta Capital. The blood drained from Andrew's face. I thought he might faint. Those were his secret companies. The ones he thought no one knew about. The ones where he'd been hiding assets for months, preparing for his grand exit strategy. How did you... Andrew began, then stopped, his lawyer's instincts finally kicking in. Corporate espionage is such an ugly term, I mused from the podium. I prefer to think of it as due diligence. Amazing what a private investigator can discover when they have unlimited resources and a billionaire father's backing. Aaliyah finally found her voice, high and panicked. Morgan, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. We can explain. Oh, I understand perfectly. I cut her off. You've been living in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my guest room while planning to steal my husband and half my inheritance. Very efficient of you. Though I have to ask, was fucking Andrew part of the original plan or just a happy accident? The question hit its mark. Aaliyah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Andrew looked like he'd been struck by lightning. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Aaliyah's voice filled the cathedral through the sound system, crystal clear and damning. The timing has to be perfect, Andrew, right after the old man dies before Morgan has time to think clearly. She'll be too grief-stricken to fight the divorce terms. We take half the inheritance and disappear. The recording continued, capturing months of planning, scheming, and betrayal. Their voices discuss my father's health, my emotional state, and the best ways to manipulate me during my grief. Every conversation I'd pretended not to hear. Every secret meeting I'd known about, thanks to the security system they'd been too arrogant to consider. You recorded us? Andrew's voice cracked. I recorded everything, I confirmed. Did you really think my father built a tech empire without understanding surveillance? Our house has always been wired. Every conversation, every indiscretion, every planning session for your grand betrayal, all documented, all admissible in court. Harry pulled out another document, this one bearing multiple official seals. Mr. Fletcher, you're being served with divorce papers, citing adultery, fraud, and conspiracy. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. But the prenup, Andrew started desperately, becomes null and void in cases of adultery. Harry finished smoothly, as clearly stated in Section 12, subsection 4. The congregation erupted in whispers and gasps. Phones buzzed with social media updates. In the space of 10 minutes, Andrew had gone from successful businessman to publicly humiliated. His reputation lay in ruins at the altar of his own making. I wasn't finished. There's one more thing, I announced, silencing the crowd. The inheritance my father left isn't just money. It's controlling interest in Omnitech Solutions. Andrew went dead pale. That's impossible. Omnitech is my company. Actually, Harry interjected with visible satisfaction. A forensic audit reveals that 72% of Omnitech's assets were purchased using loans guaranteed by Gold Coast Industries, loans that are now being called due immediately. I watched as understanding dawned on Andrew's face. Not only was he losing me and half our personal assets, he was losing his entire business empire. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd betrayed me to protect. Morgan, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I stepped down from the podium, moving toward him with the grace of a predator closing in on wounded prey. When I reached him, I leaned in close enough that only he could hear my final words. You declared your mistress at my father's funeral, Andrew, in front of 200 witnesses, while I was giving his eulogy. I smiled, and I could see my own reflection in his terrified eyes. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Then I turned to address the crowd one final time. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my father's life. I think he would have enjoyed this service very much. As I walked toward the cathedral doors, leaving my husband and stepsister to face the consequences of their choices. I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Questions shouted by reporters, the click of cameras, the buzz of social media exploding with the scandal of the century. All I felt was the satisfaction of a job well done. After all, I was Daniel Vanderbilt's daughter, and we always finish what we started. The aftermath of the funeral was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Within hours, every major news outlet had picked up the story. Tech heiress destroys cheating husband at father's funeral were the headlines, while social media exploded with hashtags like hashtag funeral revenge and hashtag Morgan wins. The video footage captured by dozens of phones went viral. I watched it all unfold from the sanctuary of my father's private office, now my private office, 40 floors above the city. The sleek designed room still smelled like his cologne and Cuban cigars, a comforting presence. The legal team is standing by, Harry reported, settling into the leather chair across from my desk the next morning. Andrew's lawyers are already calling for meetings. Damage control. Too late for that, I replied, swiveling my chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the corporate warfare being waged. What about Omnitech? Stocks dropped 28% in after-hours trading. The board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Harry's smile was shark-like. Seems they're concerned about their CEO's stability. Perfect. Andrew had spent years building Omnitech into a formidable competitor to my father's empire. Now I was going to watch it crumble, just like he tried to do to me. My phone buzzed with yet another call from an unknown number. I'd been ignoring them all day. Reporters, mutual friends fishing for gossip, distant relatives suddenly interested in my well-being. But this one showed a name I recognized. Karen Fletcher, Andrew's mother. I answered on the fourth ring. I put her on speaker. "Morgan, dear," came the cultured voice that had once welcomed me into the Fletcher family with fake warmth. I saw the news. Surely there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Karen. Your son publicly humiliated me at my father's funeral with my stepsister. I'd say that's pretty clear. Pause. Men make mistakes, dear, especially when they're under pressure. Andrew has been working so hard lately. Maybe he's not thinking clearly. I rolled my eyes. He's been thinking very clearly, I interrupted. Months of planning, scheming. There's recording of secret phone calls. This wasn't a mistake, Karen. This was a calculated betrayal. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its maternal warmth. What do you want, Morgan? Now we were speaking on equal ground. I want your son to understand the consequences. I want him to lose everything just like he tried to make me lose everything. And I want him to know that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. You're being emotional. I'm being strategic. There's a difference. I stood, then walked to the window. Tell me, Karen, how much of Omnitech's success depends on those government contracts? The ones that Andrew is so proud of? The ones that require security clearances and moral character assessments? The silence stretched long enough for me to count 3 helicopters crossing the skyline. You wouldn't, she whispered finally. I already have. The ethics investigation should begin by next week. Amazing how quickly bureaucrats move when a multi-billion-dollar corporation makes the request. I hung up before she could respond. There was something deeply satisfying about cutting off a conversation at exactly the right moment. Another lesson from my father. He always said, leave them wanting more, even if what they wanted was mercy. The elevator chimed and Melanie Boating walked in. She'd been my father's head of security for 15 years. A former CIA operative who looked like a yoga instructor, but could kill you with a paperclip. Now she works for me. The house is secure, she reported, settling into the chair. Harry left the room. Andrew attempted to return around 11 a.m. Security turned him away as instructed. He's currently at the Marriott downtown, room 1227. Aaliyah is with him. How romantic. Their first night together as a publicly known couple, and they're hiding in a hotel. I smiled while making a note on my tablet. Any press trying to get to them? TMZ has reporters camped in the lobby. Andrew made the mistake of using his credit card for the room, so his location leaked within hours. Melanie's expression remained perfectly neutral, but I caught the hint of amusement in her eyes. Amateur move. He's always been better at making money than keeping secrets. Speaking of which, what's the status of the financial investigation? Melanie consulted her tablet. The forensic accountants found 3 more shell companies. Total diverted assets appear to be around $47 million, all traced back to accounts Andrew opened 18 months ago. 18 months ago? That meant he'd been planning this betrayal since before my father's cancer scare. Around the time I started talking about wanting children. Since before my deepest fears about losing the only family I had left. Any sign of Aaliyah's involvement in the financial fraud? She's listed as a signatory on 2 of the accounts. Either she's more involved than she's pretending, or Andrew is setting her up to take some of the fall. Melanie paused. Given his track record with loyalty, I'd bet on the latter. I laughed, a sound that held no humor. Poor Aaliyah. She thought she was seducing a successful businessman. Instead, she's tied herself to a sinking ship. Should we warn her? Why would we do that? She made her choice. Let her live with the consequences. My computer chimed with an incoming email marked urgent. The sender was Colin Hawthorne, Goldcast Industries' biggest competitor and my father's former protege. We circled each other professionally for years. Respectful adversaries in the world of corporate warfare. The subject line read, Beneficial Proposal. I opened it already, knowing what I'd find. Colin had always been 3 moves ahead in business, and he'd just witnessed the most spectacular corporate meltdown in recent history. Of course, he'd want to capitalize on it. Miss Vanderbilt. The email began with characteristic formality, referring to me with my maiden name. I trust you're managing your current circumstances with your usual grace. I have a proposition that might interest you. Perhaps dinner tomorrow? I believe we have much to discuss. I showed Melanie the message. Ambitious timing. Smart timing, I corrected. He knows I'm about to control Omnitech's assets. He's positioning himself as an ally before I have time to consider him an enemy. Are you interested? I considered the question. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Colin Hawthorne was brilliant, ruthless, and attractive, in the way powerful men often were. Dangerous and magnetic in equal measure. He was also everything Andrew wasn't. Honest about his intentions, loyal to his principles, and smart enough to recognize a worthy adversary. Schedule the dinner, I decided. But not for tomorrow. Make him wait 4 days. If he's going to court the most powerful woman in tech, he can learn some patience. Melanie nodded, making notes. Anything else? Yes. I want complete surveillance on Andrew and Aaliyah. Everything. Phone calls, emails, where they go, who they see. If they so much as order room service, I want to know about it. Consider it done. Melanie left to coordinate my small army of investigators, lawyers, and security personnel. I remained at the window, watching the city transform from day to night. Somewhere down there, Andrew was probably pacing his hotel room, frantically calling lawyers and trying to salvage what remained of his life. Aaliyah was likely crying into expensive tissues, realizing that her grand romance had turned into a nightmare of legal complications and public humiliation. Tomorrow, the real work begins. I had an empire to build, enemies to destroy, and a reputation to establish as someone you definitely didn't want to cross. After all, I was just getting started. The next morning brought headlines that exceeded even my expectations. The Morgan Vanderbilt Show: How a Grieving Heiress Became a Corporate Assassin Overnight, dominated the financial pages, while gossip sites ran continuous coverage of what they dubbed the funeral that broke the internet. My assistant counted 47 interview requests before 9 a.m., including offers from 3 major networks for exclusive interviews. I ignored them all. I had more pressing matters to attend to, namely the complete destruction of my former husband's business empire. The Omnitech board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and I made sure to arrive early. The 42nd floor conference room buzzed with nervous energy as 13 board members, mostly middle-aged men in expensive suits, tried to process how their Tuesday morning had turned into a corporate crisis management session. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced as I entered. My Louboutin heels clicked against marble with military precision. "I believe you've been expecting me." Adam Sterling, the board chairman and Andrew's longtime mentor, stood slowly. At 53, he navigated countless corporate storms, but this morning he looked like a man who just discovered his house was built on quicksand. "Morgan, our condolences on your father's passing and our regrets about yesterday's unfortunate circumstances." Unfortunate? I savored the word like fine wine. That's one way to describe watching your CEO publicly humiliate himself at a funeral, though I suspect your shareholders might have stronger opinions. I took the seat at the head of the table, Andrew's seat. I opened my tablet with deliberate calm. Around me, 13 powerful members shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were witnessing a hostile takeover or attending their own professional funeral. "Shall we discuss the elephant in the room?" I continued. "Or would you prefer to pretend that your CEO's public meltdown hasn't already cost the company 28% of its market value?" "Now see here," sputtered Arnold Grimes, Omnitech's largest independent shareholder. "Andrew made a personal mistake, but that doesn't affect his ability to run this company." "Personal mistake?" I pulled up a video on my tablet and turned it toward the board. Security footage from our home office played in clear detail, showing Andrew and Aaliyah planning my divorce while going through confidential Gold Coast Industries files. "This is corporate espionage, Arnold. Your CEO has been stealing trade secrets and planning to sell them to competitors after our divorce." The room erupted in whispers and sharp intakes of breath. Adam leaned forward, his face grave. "Morgan, these are serious allegations." "They're not allegations, they're facts, documented and verified by 3 independent security firms." I brought up another file on my tablet. "Would you like to see the financial records showing how Andrew has been siphoning company assets into shell corporations, or perhaps the communications, proving he's been manipulating stock prices through insider trading?" The silence that followed was deafening. The board members stared at evidence that could destroy not just Andrew, but potentially implicate anyone who'd been complicit in his schemes. "What do you want?" Adam asked quietly. Andrew's immediate resignation as CEO, a full investigation into his financial activities, and my appointment as interim CEO while the board conducts a proper search for new leadership. "You?" Arnold's voice cracked like a whip. "You have no experience running a tech company." "I have an MBA from Wharton, 5 years of strategic consulting experience, and I just inherited controlling interest in the most successful tech empire on the East Coast." I smiled sweetly. "Plus, I'm not currently under investigation for corporate fraud. That seems like a significant qualification these days. My phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. Andrew and Aaliyah are in the lobby. Security is holding them. Perfect timing. It seems we have visitors, I announced, standing gracefully. I believe your former CEO would like to address the board. Shall we invite him up? Before anyone could object, Andrew burst through the conference room doors like a madman. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. Wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, eyes red-rimmed from what I assumed was a sleepless night of panic and scotch. "Morgan, stop this madness," he demanded, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "You can't seriously think the board will listen to anything you have to say. You're having an emotional breakdown." "The only person having a breakdown is you," I replied calmly. "Though I suppose that's understandable, given that your career, reputation, and financial future all imploded in the span of 24 hours. Alia appeared behind him, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. The layers of concealer couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the tremor in her hands. "Morgan, please," she whispered. "Can't we discuss this privately? As a family?" I let out a dry chuckle. "Family?" I let the word hang in the air like a toxic cloud. "Is that what you call fucking my husband while living in my house? Interesting definition." "We never meant for anyone to get hurt," she started. "But you did mean to steal half my inheritance and destroy my marriage for profit. The hurt was just collateral damage." I turned back to Andrew. "Tell me, darling, was seducing my stepsister part of your original plan? Or did that just happen naturally when you realized she was as morally bankrupt as you are?" Andrew's face flushed crimson. "You don't understand what Aaliyah and I have is real. It's not about money." "Of course it's about money. Everything is about money when you're facing federal fraud charges." I pulled up another document on my tablet. "The FBI will be very interested in your offshore accounts, Andrew, especially the ones in Aaliyah's name." Aaliyah gasped. "What offshore accounts? Andrew, what is she talking about?" The look of genuine confusion on her face was almost pitiable. She really had no idea how thoroughly Andrew had been using her. Even in betrayal, she was getting betrayed. "Andrew," she repeated, her voice rising. "What accounts?" But Andrew was staring at me with the expression of a man who just realized he's been playing chess against a grandmaster while thinking it was checkers. "How long have you known?" he whispered. "About the affair? 3 months. About the financial fraud? 7 weeks. About your plan to use my father's death as cover for your grand exit strategy?" I smiled, and it was my father's smile. "Since the day you made your first phone call to coordinate the timeline." "Then why didn't you—" "Stop you," I finished. "Because I needed you to commit completely. Half measures wouldn't have been enough to destroy you properly. I needed you to be so confident in your plan that you'd make it public in front of witnesses, with cameras rolling. I needed you to believe you won right up until the moment you realized you'd lost everything." The board members were watching this exchange like spectators at a brutal tennis match. Adam had gone pale, probably calculating his own exposure to Andrew's schemes. "The vote," Arnold announced suddenly. "All in favor of accepting Andrew Fletcher's resignation as CEO." 13 hands rose without hesitation. "All in favor of appointing Morgan Vanderbilt as interim CEO pending a full investigation." 12 hands went up. Adam abstained, but 12 was more than enough. "Congratulations, Miss Vanderbilt," Arnold said formally. "Omnitech is yours." I looked at Andrew, watching him realize that everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd betrayed me to protect, now belonged to me. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen," I said graciously. "Smart decision." I watched Andrew crumble, and Aaliyah finally understand the magnitude of their catastrophe. I was just getting started. 3 weeks into my tenure as interim CEO of Omnitech, I learned that corporate warfare was remarkably similar to actual warfare. It required strategy, patience, and the willingness to strike when your enemies least expected it. What I hadn't anticipated was how much I'd enjoy it. The SEC investigation is moving faster than expected, Harry reported from across my new corner office, formerly Andrew's sanctuary of masculine ego and leather furniture. I had it redecorated in clean, neutral tones and natural light. They are particularly interested in the Cayman Island accounts. And Aaliyah's reaction when she discovered Andrew had been hiding money in her name? Explosive, according to our surveillance. She threw a Hermes bag at his head and called him several names I won't repeat in polite company. Harry's weathered face cracked into what might have been a smile. She hired her own lawyer. Seems she's finally realized she's been set up as the fall guy. Perfect. Nothing destroys criminal conspiracies faster than honor amongst thieves. My assistant knocked and entered. Miss Vanderbilt, your 3 p.m. is here. Colin walked in with the confidence of a man who owned everything. He surveyed the newly redesigned office. He built Comar Dynamics into Gold Coast Industries' fiercest competitor through a combination of brilliant strategy and ruthlessness. His smile suggested he was genuinely enjoying our corporate chess match. Morgan, you look radiant for someone who's been systematically destroying her ex-husband's life. Soon-to-be ex-husband, I corrected, gesturing for him to sit. The divorce isn't final yet, though Andrew seems to be expediting the process by providing evidence of his own adultery and fraud. Colin laughed, a rich sound that filled the office. I had to admire his efficiency. Most men take months to completely sabotage their lives. He managed it in a single afternoon. What can I say? I married an overachiever. I settled into my chair, studying him across the desk. I assume you didn't come here to discuss my matrimonial disasters. On the contrary, your matrimonial disasters are exactly why I'm here. He leaned forward, his expression shifting to business mode. Omnitech is hemorrhaging clients, dwindling stock values and tarnished credibility. Your board is panicking. Your employees are updating their resumes. In about 6 months, this company will be worthless. Your point? My point is that Comar Dynamics has the resources to acquire Omnitech assets before they become completely worthless. A merger would save hundreds of jobs and protect your shareholders from total loss. I've been expecting this conversation since the day I took over. Colin was nothing, if not opportunistic, and wounded companies were his specialty. He built his empire by acquiring struggling firms and transforming them into profitable entities. And what would this merger look like, exactly? Generous terms. Omnitech shareholders get Comar Dynamics stock at a premium rate. Key employees get retention bonuses. You get a position on our board and operational control of the integrated technology division. He paused. His eyes never left mine. Plus, you get protection from the inevitable legal fallout when the FBI finishes investigating Andrew's activities. It was a good offer. Better than good, actually. Colin was essentially offering to save Omnitech from the consequences of Andrew's crimes while giving me a soft landing in a more powerful position. I refused it. Interesting proposal, I said finally. But you're operating under a false assumption. You assume I want to save Omnitech. The silence stretched between us. Colin's expression shifted from confident to confused to something approaching respect. You want to destroy it completely, he said slowly. This isn't about saving the company or the employees or the shareholders. This is about burning down everything Andrew built. Now you're beginning to understand. I stood, moving toward the window that overlooked the city. Omnitech was Andrew's pride and joy, his legacy, his proof that he was more than just a man who married into money. Saving it would defeat the entire purpose. What happens to the innocent people caught in the crossfire? The employees who had nothing to do with his schemes? They'll find other jobs. Better jobs, probably. The tech industry is booming. I turned back to face him. Besides, most of Omnitech's best talent has already been poached by competitors, including you. If I'm not mistaken, Colin's smile returned sharper this time. You've been watching my hiring practices. I've been watching everything. It's amazing what you can learn when people think you're just a grieving widow having an emotional breakdown. So, if you're not interested in saving Omnitech, what do you want? From you? Nothing. I'm perfectly capable of destroying my ex-husband's company without assistance. I returned to my desk, pulling out a thick folder. However, I might be interested in discussing other opportunities. Gold Coast Industries have been considering expanding into Pacific and Asian markets. Your company has excellent connections in those regions. I slid the folder across the desk. Perhaps we could explore some mutually beneficial arrangements. Colin opened the folder. His eyebrows rose as he scanned the contents. These are some very lucrative contracts. They could be if I had a partner I could trust. And what makes you think you can trust me? Because you've been honest about your intentions from the beginning. You want to acquire assets and expand your empire. You're not pretending this is about love or family or any other sentimental nonsense. I leaned back in my chair. I can work with naked ambition. It's the lies that create problems. Colin closed the folder and looked at me with new appreciation. You know, when I first heard about your funeral performance, I thought you were either brilliant or completely unhinged. And now I'm thinking both might be true, which makes you either the perfect business partner or the most dangerous woman in corporate America. He laughed again, but this time there was weariness mixed with admiration. Have dinner with me tomorrow to discuss these potential arrangements. Make it Friday. Tomorrow I have a board meeting to destroy. As Colin left, I turned back to the window and watched the sunset over the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was probably pacing another hotel room, calling lawyers who wouldn't return his calls and watching his life's work crumble in real time soon. He'd have nothing left but the memory of what he'd thrown away. And I'd have everything I'd ever wanted. Power, respect, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the quietest person in the room really is the most dangerous. The Omnitech board meeting that would decide the company's fate was scheduled for Thursday morning. But the real drama began Wednesday night when Andrew made his most desperate move yet. I was working late in my office, reviewing the final details of my presentation, when Melanie burst through the doors with an urgency I'd rarely seen from her. "We have a problem," she announced. Her usual composure cracked around the edges. "Andrew just filed an emergency injunction claiming you're mentally unfit to serve as CEO. He's alleging grief-induced psychosis and demanding immediate psychiatric evaluation." I set down my pen, feeling something cold and vicious settle in my chest. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming your behavior at the funeral was evidence of a complete psychological break. Says no rational person would destroy their own marriage and family relationships unless they were severely mentally ill." Melanie consulted her tablet. "He's got Aaliyah backing his story, plus 2 psychiatrists who've never met you but are willing to testify about grief-induced delusional episodes. Psychiatrists he's paying no doubt through shell companies. But yes, the hearing is set for tomorrow morning, 1 hour before the board meeting. If he wins, you'll be removed as CEO and committed for evaluation." I stood and walked to the window. Andrew was playing his final card, and it was more vicious than I'd expected. He was trying to have me declared insane. "There's more," Melanie continued. He leaked the story to several media outlets. By morning, every major news platform will be running headlines about the mentally unstable heiress and her dangerous corporate rampage. I chuckled. The brilliance of his strategy was almost admirable. If he couldn't beat me in business, he'd destroy my credibility entirely. Who would trust a CEO who's been declared mentally incompetent? Who would believe anything I said once the label of crazy was attached to my name? He's not just trying to save Omni Tech, I realized. He's trying to destroy my reputation, so I'll never recover from it. It gets worse. Aaliyah is claiming you threatened her life during a private conversation. Says you've been stalking them, making death threats, exhibiting signs of violent psychosis. I laughed heartily this time. Of course she is. The perfect victim, terrorized by her unstable stepsister. Morgan, we need to take this seriously. If even one judge believes their story. They won't. I turned from the window. My mind was already calculating angles and strategies. Because Andrew just made the same mistake he's been making all along. He underestimated exactly how prepared I am for war. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a file I'd hoped never to use. Inside are medical records, psychological evaluations, and expert testimony dating back 8 months, all documenting my mental health with scientific precision. The day I found out about the affair, I started seeing Dr. Eliza Hunter, Harvard psychiatrist, former FBI profiler with an unimpeachable reputation. I've had weekly sessions for months, all documented, all proving my complete psychological stability, despite extreme emotional trauma. Melanie's eyebrows rose. You've been planning for this exact scenario. I've been planning for every scenario, including the possibility that Andrew would eventually try to have me declared insane. I pulled out another folder. I also have recordings of every conversation Aaliyah and I have had since she moved into my house. Not one contains a threat of any kind. What they do contain is her asking me repeatedly for money, lying about her relationship with Andrew, and plotting to steal my inheritance. As for the psychiatrist he's hired, Dr. Sarah Mills lost her license in New York for falsifying patient records. Dr. Robert McCain has been sanctioned twice for providing expert testimony without proper evaluation. Harry found all this yesterday when we ran background checks. I was already dialing Harry's number, my fingers moving across the phone screen. Harry, it's Morgan. I need you to file an emergency counter motion. Defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I want Andrew and Aaliyah arrested for perjury before tomorrow's hearing. On what grounds? Harry's voice was sharp with interest. Falsifying psychiatric claims, bribing medical professionals, and attempting to manipulate legal proceedings through fraud. Use the documentation proving Andrew knew his expert witnesses were discredited before he hired them. Consider it done. Anything else? Yes. I want you to leak Andrew's medical records from his stay at Passages Malibu last year, the one for cocaine addiction and gambling problems. If he wants to play the mental health card, let's see how his own psychological history holds up under scrutiny. I hung up and turned back to Melanie, who was watching me with something approaching awe. You are truly like your father. You've been planning this for months, she said slowly. Yes, I am. Every move, every counter move. Even your own mental health documentation. I've been planning for this since the day I realized my husband was a snake. The only question was what kind of venom he'd try to use when cornered. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You can't win this, Morgan. Stop fighting and accept help. I showed the message to Melanie. Screenshot this and add it to the harassment file. I'm sure Andrew was convinced he'd finally found the perfect weapon to destroy me. Idiot. What are you going to do tomorrow? I smiled. I'm going to remind everyone why you never corner a Vanderbilt unless you're absolutely certain you can kill them. Because when we survive, we don't just fight back, we annihilate. Tomorrow, Andrew will learn the difference between being clever and being smart. I will show him exactly what happens when you try to have Morgan Vanderbilt declared insane. After all, the only crazy thing would be thinking he could win. 6 months later, I stood in the ruins of what had once been Omnitech's headquarters, watching the demolition crew tear down the last remnants of Andrew's empire. The building would become a public park funded by the Vanderbilt Foundation for corporate ethics. It seemed fitting. The emergency hearing had been a massacre. Andrew arrived in handcuffs, arrested an hour before proceedings began on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and perjury. His psychiatrist experts had been exposed as frauds. Their testimonies crumbled under Harry's methodical cross-examination. When Dr. Robert McCain took the stand to testify about my complete psychological stability, the judge had dismissed the case with prejudice and recommended Andrew for psychiatric evaluation himself. But that was just the opening act. The real show began when the FBI raided his hotel room during the hearing, discovering an additional $32 million in stolen assets, detailed plans to flee the country, and enough evidence of corporate espionage to put him away for decades. Aaliyah was caught with forged documents and money she couldn't explain. She immediately flipped on Andrew in exchange for a reduced sentence. The media circus that followed made our funeral confrontation look like a quiet family dinner. The contractors estimate another 3 weeks for complete demolition, Melanie reported while joining me on the observation deck. The park design is beautiful, by the way. Your father would have loved the memorial garden. I smiled, imagining Dad's reaction to having his legacy literally growing over the ruins of his enemies. What's the latest on our former friends? Andrew was sentenced yesterday. 25 years federal prison with possibility of parole after 15 years served. Turns out the cocaine addiction you leaked was just the tip of the iceberg. He's been embezzling from client accounts for 2 years. Melanie consulted her tablet with obvious satisfaction. Alia got 7 years in federal prison, then will be deported back to Romania. Apparently, her visa was fraudulent too, and Omnitech's assets liquidated completely. The employees you wanted to protect all received generous severance packages and job placement assistance. Most of them landed better positions within a month. Melanie paused to scroll on her tablet. The shareholders lost everything, but given they enabled Andrew's behavior for years, public sympathy is limited. I watched another section of the wall crumble, feeling nothing but closure. Omnitech had been Andrew's monument to his own ego. Now it would become something useful, a place for families to gather, children to play, couples to enjoy each other's company. Ms. Vanderbilt, my new assistant, appeared at my elbow. Young, eager, and blissfully unaware of the corporate carnage that had preceded her employment. Mr. Colin Hawthorne is here for your 4 p.m. Send him up. Colin arrived carrying 2 champagne flutes and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who just closed the deal of his lifetime. Our Pacific and Asian expansion had exceeded every projection, making both our companies billions, while establishing us as the most formidable partnership in the tech industry. Celebrating something? I asked, accepting the champagne. The final papers came through an hour ago. Gold Coast Industries and Comar Dynamics are now officially partners. Congratulations, he raised his glass, to the most profitable partnership in corporate history. To surviving the idiots who made this happen, I countered. We drank. Any regrets? Colin asked, nodding toward the demolition below. About destroying Omnitech? None. Maybe about trusting Andrew in the first place. I watched as another wall fell. I regret wasting 5 years loving someone who was never worthy of it, but I don't regret what that experience taught me, which is, love without respect is worthless. That trust without verification is stupidity. The only person you can truly rely on is yourself. I chuckled. Well, yourself, in a really excellent legal team. You know what else I realized? I continued. What? Colin asked. I don't believe in marriage anymore. I don't want to be anyone's wife, anyone's other half, anyone's plus one. I've spent 30 years being defined by my relationship to other people. Daniel Vanderbilt's daughter, Andrew Fletcher's wife, the woman who got betrayed at a funeral. I turned to look at Colin. I like being Morgan, period, unapologetically myself. Colin's expression showed intrigue. Are you saying no to marriage or no to commitment? I'm saying no to ownership. Yes, partnership, and to building something incredible with no legal contracts that turn love into property. Colin laughed. You know, most women would be offended by that logic. Most women didn't spend their father's funeral watching their husband declare his mistress in front of 200 witnesses. Most women didn't systematically destroy their ex-husband's life as a form of therapy. I grinned. I'm not most women. No, you're not, Colin agreed. We stood and watched the sun set over our conquered city. The demolition crew called it a day, leaving Omnitech's skeleton to wait for tomorrow's continued demolition. By this time next year, there would be cherry trees in its place.